Okay, so for those of you who are instructions impaired like me, I like visual stuff, so I thought I would show you what we're trying to accomplish. I just mocked it up real quick before I actually screw everything down, but this is the crib for the four. I'm going to build 4 of these, one for each tire, and we have 16-inch 2x4s cut already, as you've seen, and I cut these little 4-inch, I don't know, what do you call them? Whatever they are, 4 inches to stick in between to transfer the weight from the tire down to the concrete. So this will help with the weight distribution. Otherwise, all the weight's on the corners, and so I just thought that might help it up, a little bit. The car's not that heavy, but still, it'll help for, especially if I use it for another vehicle one day. So this is the transmission that we're looking at, and as you guys know, you've seen it, and so it's measured it from the bell housing is roughly 16 inches, let's say. And I'm going to use this little guy down here. It's like a motorcycle jack, but it should work for the transmission. That's it's about what, 4.5 inches. So I need basically 21 inches of clearance to get the transmission underneath the car. And the car is gonna, once I set it back down on the wheels, if I look at clearance here, I can't really show it to you too well, but it's roughly 5 inches or so, 5.5, 6 inches off the ground. So that should give us plenty of clearance when we take into account, because this is 16 inches here, roughly. So this is the same height as the transmission. I mean, it's a shade shorter, but it's going to be okay, I think. So once we add the transmission we put the transmission on this puppy, we should be in good shape. So that's the idea. I'm gonna put these babies together and see if we can get this car up on these stands, on these cribs, so that we can get this, get under there and get the drive shaft pulled out and start working on the transmission. And I'm pretty nervous about this, to be honest, because, you look at this. I know a lot of you guys know what this is. I think this is a throwout bearing here. I guess this is what the clutch pushes. I'm like lost on these manual transmissions. I'm lost on any kind of transmission. I never replaced one, but hey dude, we're gonna figure this out. So stay tuned, here we go. Alrighty guys, check this out. We got them up. Got a big mic up on the cribs. Some people might ask me, why do you just buy some of those things? Dang, they were like, I want to say $500 or $600 for, and I can't remember if that was for 2 or 4, but they were crazy expensive to buy these things. So now we can easily get under the car and mess around with the transmission. I wanted to show you the interior. Vlad's already done some work in here to start tearing out the console. So there's our console out, So everything's done up here. I'm thinking while we have this out, I'm going to change the carpet. There's some carpet kits that are really not too terribly expensive. And I thought that would really dress it up. The interior has been done. I haven't shown y'all this, but if you can see, that's blue stitching on this car that was done actually before we bought it. Guy owned it in Birmingham, and he had a lot of custom work done to it. So it was really sweet on the inside. It's got a velour head cover, whatever you call that stupid thing. And then under here, I'll show you that work we gotta do real quick. So there's, we gotta take that cross member out, and there's your transmission. And there's a little arm I was talking about. I think that's definitely the clutch connection. So I know you car guys are like, you're not really smart. Well, I know that. That's why I have YouTube. And then look at this. We have a carbon fiber drive shaft that Milton Panhandle Driveline did for us. He did it for Michael special, and was just, that was the last fun drive actually that Michael and I had together. We put all this rear suspension in there, so I'll show you all that later. But anyway, that's what we got. It's up and on the cribs. And so now that we got this bad boy up, it's time to either pull the transmission out or cut this transmission housing off. I'm not sure yet. I don't know. I might come out here tomorrow and mess around a little bit with it, but we got to get that done. But I wanted to share something with you about Michael, about something the Lord showed me, talked to me about. And we, how do I get started on this? You know, John the Baptist, if you look at John the Baptist's story, and John the Baptist sent two representatives to two of his disciples to Jesus to essentially ask him, are you the one or not? Or should we be expecting someone else? And Jesus' answer was, you see the deaf hear, you see the blind see, you see the dead are raised, you see the gospel preached to the poor. And that was his answer. He didn't say yes or no. So he let John figure it out. And then you can tell from the story that John was struggling with his expectations, I guess, of how the Messiah would look and what he would do. More importantly, most people of the day, the Jews, were thinking that Jesus or the Messiah would come back, the Christ would come and overthrow Rome. And so when that didn't happen, I'm sure John the Baptist was wondering, so I must have something wrong. And I got to thinking, I was thinking about my last day with Michael in the hospital with our family, and really how difficult that was to watch him struggling to breathe, and knowing that he was going to pass to heaven. And, you know, we had been praying for his healing. We had been believing for his healing, that God would heal his body. In fact, excuse me, we thought that after the Lord had given him this word from Revelation 2:12, I'll share that with you again, or initially, and later down the road, I'm going to tell you the whole story of that final week. It basically said, if you will suffer for me for 10 days in Revelation chapter 2, I will give you, and you do not deny me until death, I will give you the crown of life. And so the last thing that Michael told me on Friday night, he died on Saturday, was he said, Dad, I will never deny. He says, I don't want to die. This is the last thing he told me. He says, I don't want to die. He says, he says, because there's so much work to do. He had understood that he wanted to tell his story and talk about Jesus and tell about Jesus. So for me, for a father who had been praying for him and a mother who had been praying for him for all this time, it was like fresh water to my soul. But yet he's on this bed dying. And so he said, I don't want to die. But if I do, he says, but if I am, he says, I will not deny Jesus. That was his last words to me. And so Saturday, it's in the afternoon, and everyone's crying and praying over Michael and me included. And I stood up at one point. I stood at the foot of the bed, and I just kind of looked out the window, and it just wasn't really a prayer. It was a statement. I just said, Jesus, I can't do this alone. I can't. I said, you've got to help me. I was becoming literally crushed by the weight of seeing my son struggle to breathe and knowing that he was, we didn't know at the time if it would last days, hours, minutes. We had no clue. Well, I stood there for just a few more minutes, and the Lord came and stood by my side. And I didn't see him, but I could feel his presence. And it wasn't like an overwhelming, a lot of people feel a lot of love and very powerful emotions, and I didn't. I just knew he was there all of a sudden. And all he said to me was, I go to prepare a place for him. And I sensed him walk off, and then I saw in my mind's eye, I may have shared this with you earlier, when I pray and I need to know I need to hear God, I go to this imaginary place in heaven. It's a park bench. It's pretty bare. It's a park bench on the sea of life. I call it. I don't know if it's there. It comes out of the throne room. There's water that comes out of the throne room of God, and I imagine that it collects into a lake. And so I sit there. It's about 20 feet away from the throne room, which sadly in my mind is just a big cinder block building. But it's where I go to hang out with God when I know that he needs to hear me. But I saw that in my mind's eye, that park bench in my mind's eye just appeared, and I saw a sunset over the lake. And so I knew that he was preparing a place for Michael to go rest because he had been through so much. And so I got to thinking about this last week. I thought about that moment, and I thought about John the Baptist. And, we had prayed for healing, and we had prayed that God would heal him, and he didn't do it the way we expected. And in fact, Jesus was probably physically in the room with us. He's always nearby, but his actual literal body was probably in the room with us. And literally all he had to do was reach over and touch Michael's foot, leg, body, and he would have gotten up immediately and walked out of that room totally healed physically. I just had that realization the other day that he could have just reached over and touched Jesus. That's what we were believing for. He didn't. He chose his will, which we have been praying for. The Lord, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And he went to prepare a place for Michael. Michael took his last breath probably 20 to 30 minutes later. Man, that was so hard. But I had the beautiful thought of Jesus embracing him when he got home. What a thought that was. And that still carries me today. So I want to encourage you, if you're not seeing answers to your prayer, and Michael was healed. Now, people could argue that, well, he wasn't really healed. No, his physical body wasn't healed, but his heart, soul was healed. His body was healed. In fact, Sophia, we were talking about his arm, that he couldn't use his left arm because he had his left arm, his bone and his whole humerus had been replaced with a donor bone. So he couldn't do this. He could only lift his arm maybe this high. He could move his lower arm, but he could not move from his shoulder. So it was about like this. That was it. So he couldn't use it, and his arm was sore because of the surgery, and it had cancer in it. And so Sophia, we were laughing about this, and then we started crying about it. We were talking about his arm and how many times she would hug him or whatever, and he would scream, and a little bit of pain, and she'd say, "I'm so sorry." And then we were on a trip together, she and I and my lovely wife, and after we talked about that, she had a dream of Michael that night. And Michael came and stood in front of her. She said he was elevated off the ground 1.5 feet or so, had light coming from behind him, and he had his hair was like it was when he was a freshman in college. So it was brown and parted in the middle, kind of long, shoulder length hair. And he said, "Look, Sophia," he said, "look, I can move my arm. I can move my arm." And it was just just so good of God to show us that he has been healed and that he is okay. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you've been discouraged through prayer and you haven't seen the answers that you're expecting, keep praying, but maybe change your prayer. Let God, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then open your heart to his possibilities. I'm not saying he won't heal you physically. He won't heal your loved one physically. I'm not saying that at all. But I've learned that God's ways are higher than ours. I'm still figuring out, my wife and I both, my whole family is trying to figure out why Michael isn't here. Is it something we did? Something we didn't do? But ultimately, Michael's death serves a higher purpose because we get to tell his story, and it has drawn us closer to him, ultimately. So thanks for sticking with me on this project. Next event will be either pulling the transmission out or cutting the housing off, or both. Maybe we can do them all in one weekend. God bless you.